What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Charles Oliveira next up for lightweight title. After Charles Oliveira withdrew from his scheduled UFC 294 showdown with Islam Makhachev, many fans questioned whether or not he would be passed up for the next lightweight title shot. At the UFC 294 post-fight press conference, UFC CEO Dana White indicated that the promotion would likely look to book the rematch between Makhachev and Oliveira, given that a cut forced the champ out of the fight on short notice. During a recent episode of the MMA Hour, Charles Oliveira spoke about the fight through a translator, clarifying his status as the #1 contender.
Everybody knows I'm next. First in the rankings, coming off of a great win and ready to fight like I was before. I was ready for that fight until it happened, and I'm next in line.
In addition, Oliveira also gave an update on how things stand with the UFC, indicating that although a date has not been finalized, it's only a matter of time until he hears something.
No one has said anything. Specifically, they know who I am. They know what I'm all about. They know that I'm going to train to become a champion. That I'm training and I'm getting ready for it.
Despite that, Islam Makhachev has his sights set on champ status and will reportedly be in attendance at UFC 296 in hopes of securing a fight with the winner. With Oliveira unable to compete until his eyebrow heals, the upcoming welterweight clash between Leon Edwards and Colby Covington could play a major role in deciding how things play out for Oliveira at 155 pounds in the coming months. Next up, let's take a look at fighters react to Jon Jones' injury. This week, Dana White broke unfortunate news that Jon Jones had suffered a serious injury that was caught on camera in training. As a result, he was forced to withdraw from his scheduled UFC 295 clash with Stipe Miocic next month, which led the UFC to book an interim heavyweight clash between Tom Aspinall and Sergey Pavlovich on short notice. After the news surfaced, a number of notable UFC fighters and veterans were quick to react to the news. Longtime rival Daniel Cormier weighed in on his YouTube channel.
You know, anytime we get too excited for something, obviously it never happens. It's like Christmas when you want a Nintendo and then your mom decides to buy you the Sega.
Chael Sonnen also reacted to the news in a video for his YouTube channel, questioning what the news of an interim title fight could mean for the future of the division if Jones maintains his desire to compete against Miocic.
And you're going to put him in there with either Sergey Pavlovich or Tom Aspinall, who's a young guy that's been busy and been on a schedule. I don't think you're going to be able to make the match. So if you can't make the match, you got a champion that is unwilling to do fights unless it's with 40-plus-year-old people that haven't done it in years. That doesn't sound like a guy that can be the champion.
During a recent interview with MMA Junkie after his open workout for his showdown with Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou spoke about Jones' injury.
Well, I think it's a sad news. It's never a good news when athletes get injured. Basically, in training, you know, I hope he recovered well. I was very excited to watch that fight and to see who's going to win that fight.
In addition, Dan Hardy questioned what the news means for Miocic going forward, writing, "With Jones out of UFC 295, do you think we'll see Miocic compete again?" Of course, with his sense of humor, after stepping in to fight Islam Makhachev on short notice, Alexander Volkanovski joked that he would step in on short notice to fight Miocic, before then following it up with another tweet wishing Jones well, writing, "I volunteer as tribute, and obviously wish Johnny Bones all the best in recovery." With Jones likely sidelined for nearly a year, it'll be interesting to see how things play out for the heavyweight division in 2024. Next up, let's take a look at fighters removed from the UFC roster. A number of notable fighters were removed from the UFC's roster this week amid what appears to be the latest series of cuts. As always, the news of fighters being removed from the roster could simply mean that they've completed their contracts with the UFC. With that in mind, according to the UFC roster tracker account, Walt Harris, Daniel Rodriguez, and Ashley Yoder were all removed from the UFC's roster this week. Walt Harris had been on a 3-fight losing skid that saw him lose to Alistair Overeem, Alexander Volkov, and Marcin Tybura. His release hit fans particularly hard due to the tragic circumstances he was attempting to overcome when returning to the octagon in 2020. In the case of Daniel Rodriguez, the welterweight had been on a 2-fight skid that saw him lose to Neil Magny and Ian Machado Gary before he then was handed a 6-month suspension after failing a USADA-mandated drug test that forced him out of a September clash with Santiago Ponzinibbio. Last but certainly not least, Ashley Yoder was released amid a 3-fight losing skid that saw her go just 3-8 with the UFC prior to her release. While there seems to be hope among fans that Daniel Rodriguez could potentially make his way back into the promotion, all 3 fighters seemingly face an uphill battle if they hope to re-sign with the UFC. Now, let's shift gears and take a look at Tom Aspinall breaks silence on UFC fight. Although Jon Jones' withdrawal from UFC 295 put a damper on the upcoming event for many fans, Tom Aspinall is ready to capitalize on the opportunity in front of him. Heading into the bout, Aspinall will be looking to follow in the steps of Hall of Famer Michael Bisping, who captured UFC gold on short notice himself years back. While speaking on Monday's episode of the MMA Hour, Aspinall spoke about the fight and the similarities in the two situations.
Michael Bisping, come on.
The legend, yes.
2.5 weeks notice.
That's right.
2.5 weeks notice to the day Mike Bisping went in there and took it from Luke Rockhold on 2.5 weeks notice. Exactly the same day as I got the fight. I mean, that's something to talk about, isn't it?
As Aspinall revealed, heading into UFC 295, the UFC was seemingly under the impression that both Jones and Miocic would retire after the fight, meaning he and Pavlovich were already on a collision course, whether they knew it or not.
If they were both going to retire, then I was going to fight Pavlovich for the vacant title anyway, like early next year anyway. So I think they were just kind of going to see what happens after this card anyway. So yeah, it was just a big waiting game for me. But
given that the fight between Tom Aspinall and Sergey Pavlovich will crown the interim champion, history would dictate that Jon Jones should fight the winner of the fight. However, what the UFC ends up deciding to do remains to be seen. Next, let's take a look at Conor McGregor versus Islam Makhachev next. So far, all indications have been that when former champ Conor McGregor returns to the octagon, he'll do so against Michael Chandler. Despite that, and the reports that the pair will likely collide at UFC 300, Hall of Famer Daniel Cormier has a different idea. While speaking on a recent episode of DC and RC, Cormier threw out another potential fight: Conor McGregor versus Islam Makhachev.
I think Islam should fight Conor. I think Islam should fight Conor McGregor next. Because, listen to this now, and you have to listen, right? You have to listen, RC. It's built in. It's built in. It's the biggest money fight the UFC can make, and why not?
Of course, in the wake of UFC 294, Islam Makhachev has his sights set on a clash with the winner of the upcoming welterweight title clash between Leon Edwards and Colby Covington. Although there's undoubtedly still lingering beef between Team Makhachev and Team McGregor, there are no indications that the UFC is looking to have McGregor return against someone other than Michael Chandler right now. Despite that, Johnny Walker had an idea for the biggest fight in UFC history, writing on Instagram, "The notorious MMA beat Makhachev and Khabib comes back to revenge and the biggest rematch of UFC ever happens." A fan was then quick to drop a hilarious response to the light heavyweight contender, writing, "MF still in the desert." So far, both Makhachev and McGregor have yet to respond to DC's suggestion that the two fight. Next, let's take a look at Sean Strickland wants boxing fight next. Sean Strickland's front kicks were some of his best weapons used against Israel Adesanya at UFC 293. However, from the sounds of things, the champ is willing to put his Philly shell to the test inside the boxing ring. During a recent interview with Ariel Helwani, Devin Haney shot down Sugar Sean O'Malley's hopes of making a transition to boxing, prompting a response from middleweight champion Sean Strickland, who wrote, "I spar a lot of high-level boxers, and they always say one thing: why don't you box? Maybe one day for a big money fight." With Khamzat Chimaev potentially dealing with a broken hand, Strickland could wind up having some time before his next fight. However, the UFC has remained pretty steadfast in their unwillingness to let fighters go box in the peak of their careers. Conor McGregor, of course, was the exception, while Francis Ngannou remains the most recent example of a fighter who wanted to box and was denied the opportunity by the UFC. Could Strickland be the exception after his shocking upset over Israel Adesanya? We'll have to wait and see. Next, let's take a look at Sean O'Malley on Dillon Danis in UFC. Many members of the MMA community have little interest in seeing Dillon Danis make the transition to the UFC after his recent loss to Logan Paul. After 4 years of inactivity while signed with Bellator MMA, the promotion recently released Danis in the wake of his loss. Given that he has a record of just 2-0 as a professional, his odds of getting signed by the UFC are rather low. However, bantamweight champion Sugar Sean O'Malley thinks the promotion should sign the outspoken grappler. During a recent episode of his Timbo Sugar Show, O'Malley weighed in on the situation.
Why not sign him? Give him one fight, give him the hardest guy you want. That guy's either gonna beat Dillon and gain a lot of eyeballs, or Dillon wins and now you got a star in the UFC. I think it's a win-win. Sign him. One fight deal.
So far, Danis has remained steadfast in his belief that he will land with the UFC. As we've seen in the past, the UFC is willing to take risks and make unexpected moves when it comes to signing fighters. However, there's been little indication from the promotion that they plan to sign Danis. Dana White goes off on the MMA community after they slammed him for UFC's recent deal with Bud Light. Here's what some fans had to say. Yes, it was about core values for him, sure. Had nothing to do with AB paying a premium bid, the highest bid, to try and recoup lost revenue from the boycott. The UFC has shareholders. They demand profits. But it was all Dana and his values aligning. LMAO, what a crock. It's a fake answer though. No brand or sports league always takes the highest bidding sponsor, or there would be OnlyFans logo on NFL broadcasts. They do decide who to associate with, and I 100% bet they discussed this internally about the Bud Light controversy. Taking 100 mil is Dana White's values. Damn, and I was just going to ignore this whole thing because I assumed it was about the money. It saddens me to say this as I've been a UFC and a Dana White fan all my life, but due to this decision and the reasoning behind it, I can no longer support Dana or the UFC. Sellout, I hope the UFC tanks. This is so funny to me, all the Dana riders now getting so triggered about something so unimportant. Bud Light is a beer, and Dana's always been a greedy. It's not breaking news, dumb. It's been obvious all along. Of course he did it for the money. Really, all the guy cares about. He says that the core values of UFC and Bud Light are aligned? Huh? Expect to see Dillon Mulvaney prancing around next week as a ring girl. That too was part of the deal. Dana White responded to this recently at the press conference by saying,
"Yeah, listen, believe me, if you think that I got into this thinking that wouldn't happen, you're out of your mind. You know, people are very opinionated about this, and everybody talks about, oh, you did it for money. Hey, dummies, all sponsorship deals are about money. So when you talk about being a sellout, I had multiple deals in front of me. So it's not like, oh, Bud Light showed up and they were the only option I had to get money. You know, how stupid that is to think that, you know, for Anheuser-Busch, it was about values, core values for me. The things that I said about Anheuser-Busch and Bud Light yesterday are absolutely true. I am a big military law enforcement guy. They have this Folds of Honor where they've spent $44 million over the last however many years, fallen first responders and military people, their families get taken care of with this money, scholarships for their kids, etc. That is right up my alley. And I could keep going on and on forever and tell you why I am more aligned with Anheuser-Busch than any of the other beer companies that were offering to pay us money.
Top comments. While I don't agree with Dana's decision, it makes sense that he's chasing the bag, as that's what he's always done. However, what is completely unacceptable to me is stating that Bud Light and the UFC share core values. WTF? Sucks we'll never get to see Stipe versus Jones. Good chance we never see either of them in the octagon again, in my opinion. Nice one, Dana. That's the end of pay-per-view this side. The only thing Dana shares with Bud Light is the financial values. Guess that means Dillon Mulvaney will be the new ring girl. Word is Dana's going to start a new show too, Trans Contender Fight Night. Make sure to leave a comment and you might get featured in our next video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss any MMA news. Check out our video from yesterday if you missed it. See you tomorrow.